We're very, very pleased to have Stephanie Land with us this evening. She has quite a true story to tell and tells it quite movingly in her new book, Maid, Hard Work, Low Pay, and a Mother's Will to Survive. The story is about how a young woman, in this case, Stephanie herself, had dreams since the age of 10 of becoming a writer and was intending to enter a creative writing program. When she got involved with a guy, became pregnant, saw the relationship with the abusive boyfriend fall apart, then landed in a homeless shelter and eventually turned to cleaning houses to make ends meet. But Stephanie, thankfully for us, never gave up on her writing dreams or caring for her daughter, and she has produced a book that vividly and engagingly chronicles her time among the working poor as a single mother, trying to survive on the minimum wages of a house cleaner. Her experience highlights what it's like for those attempting to make a go of it from below the poverty line, lacking a safety net and confronting the frustrations and humiliations of exhausting work, inadequate government benefit programs, and disparaging social attitudes. Now, Stephanie will be in conversation here this evening with the journalist, author, and activist Barbara Ehrenreich, and there's a very good reason for having Barbara in this role. Among her more than 20 books is the best-selling Nickel and Dimed, which recounted her own time in the late 1990s going undercover in such low-wage jobs as house cleaner, waitress, and Walmart clerk. But in addition to being an author, Barbara is the founder of the Economic Hardship Reporting Project, which promotes journalism of economic inequality, especially by people who are struggling to get by. Barbara first met Stephanie through this organization, and today Stephanie works as a freelancer and writing fellow at both the Economic Hardship Reporting Project and the Center for Community Change. And Stephanie's book is graced with a foreword by Barbara. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming both Stephanie Land and Barbara Ehrenreich.
Thank you all for coming.
Yeah. I think, I'm best known for that book, Nickel and Dime, that Bradley mentioned. And that is a book, which I didn't do it undercover. Where did he go? I just went out with my own name and everything and got jobs that I could get, which means it was rather humbling to discover that the jobs I could get just walking in off the street or house cleaning, hotel house cleaner, nursing home aide, Walmart assistant. I'm leaving something out. But anyway, so I wrote about that and described it in gritty detail, the work as I encountered it. But tonight what you're getting is the real thing. Stephanie was not there as a journalist cleaning houses, to write about it. She was there to make money, which is actually not a good idea, Not a great way to make money. But so this is pretty special for me, and I am so glad that the Economic Hardship Reporting Project was able to help lift up Stephanie and get her writing for publication. That's fair to say, right?
Yeah. So what the EHRP does for writers is they'll edit the pieces and help place them as well.
Yeah.
So they have the editor contacts. And then another thing they do that's really important is they supplement whatever the publication pays or most often doesn't pay. And so that the low income writer is getting $1 a word is what they aim for. So for me coming into that, and that felt like a professional thing. Like I'm actually doing a real job instead of just a hobby that I do at home.
Yeah, great. And we live for people like you. People who are living the problems that some people only write about or discuss, but who are actually in the middle of them, and then we try to push them along and see that they make some money from their writing. Not only writing, we have videographers and other media represented among people we work with. What was so important to me about Stephanie's book is that it answered a question I had all the time when I was working on Nickel and Dimes, which is, how do you do this with children? See, because I, of course, could not get my children, who were grown up by that time, to come live with mom in trailer parks and so on while mom did her crazy journalistic experiment, They were not interested. So that was something I realized I could not have managed, just given the time and the money, the financial thing. But we'll talk about that more. I wanted to start with a kind of a practical kind of question. Well, it's not practical, but when I worked in Nickel and Dime, I worked for a house cleaning service. It was called the Maids International. Sounds very elite, right? And we worked in teams, so that 4 of us, quote, girls, would go in a car and go through the list of houses to clean for that day. So it's a very different experience than I think you had. And I'm just kind of curious a little bit about the differences between these companies that employ large, fairly large numbers of women, or maybe 20 or 30 in a local branch. That our lives, I think, were very, very different working for a corporation. We had to wear uniforms, for example, but the uniform was only a vest. It wasn't like a little maid outfit. Oh, thank God. And one of the things that I wondered most about you working as an individual house cleaner is, how do you negotiate what you're going to be paid with each individual?
You mean as a self-employed cleaner, or working for
You're
the cleaning company?
self-employed.
Self-employed, it kind of depended on if it was a beginning client, I don't know, when I was first starting out, I think I asked for like $15 an hour, and that seemed like a lot of money. And then I had a client say, always ask for 20. You are worth 20. And so I started asking for 20. But when I moved to Missoula, because of the financial climate there, I lowered it back to 10 and had another few clients that were 15. So it really depended on what they were willing to pay, along with what the job was, and if they were a repeat client. I don't know. I took a lot of things into account for that. The cleaning service, though, that was minimum wage to start.
Oh God, yeah, right. I actually was interviewed for one of the cleaning services with one of these cute names that has a pun about the word maid in it, and actually somebody sort of interviewed me, and I asked her what she paid, what they paid, and it was below the minimum wage. It was, and I kind of gasped, and she said, now, don't overthink it. I thought that when people say don't overthink something, an alarm should go off. Yes, overthink quickly. We had company rules, and I don't know whether there was any equivalent, for a self-employed house cleaner, but we had to. One rule was that you were nothing was to pass through your lips while you were working a job in a house. Now that could be 4 hours. It happened to be summer when I was doing this job, and it was hot. And, funnily enough, people will actually turn off their air conditioning when they have a maid coming, because why waste the energy on, this is true. And, but we were not to have a sip of water. Now, we could sneak into the bathroom and drink from the faucet, but you didn't have any equivalent kinds of things or pressures coming from employers to act in such and such a way, did you?
No, but I never really asked if it was okay either. But I was encouraged to drink lots of water. I usually had a old peanut butter jar full of coffee and like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich that I brought with me, and just kind of sipped on and ate those throughout the day whenever I got a chance.
Mm-hmm. Within the house?
Sometimes. I mean, if it was an early morning house and I was hungry, but I didn't want to eat all the sandwich at the beginning of the day, so I had to pace myself.
And what did you wear to work?
For the cleaning company, we were supposed to wear like a polo shirt with the company name on it, but no one ever saw me, and especially on days when I was working all by myself, I didn't wear it. And I didn't really get in trouble for it ever. So I just eventually stopped wearing it altogether. And then I always had these Carhartt cargo pants because they had the big pockets on the side, and I could put a bunch of rags in there and hang bottles from them. Mm-hmm. And that was, and t-shirt and sweatshirt or whatever for when I was self-employed. I wore slippers in the house, and just eventually wore slippers all the time. We weren't supposed to do that, but I had a moment that I stepped in dog poop at the job and was not wearing shoes at that time, and so I wore shoes from that point on.
One of the things that I noticed about the companies, the company I worked for anyway, is that there seemed to be more emphasis on the aesthetics of the job than on actually cleaning things. Now, I was raised by a fanatical house cleaner myself, and always thought of house cleaning as part of the human war against microbes. To be serious with hot water and lots of suds and so on. But the idea in the company was more like there was more emphasis on spraying a room freshener after you're done in the house, and you're never supposed to neglect that.
Yeah. So I've actually worked for 2 different companies and then self-employed. And the 2 companies, the first company that I worked for was very much like that. Like, we were there to make everything appear very clean. We didn't use water,
right?
Which cleaning out a bathtub and shower, like, you can't rinse it off because it creates too much of a mess, I guess, that you have to wipe off, and it's too time consuming. But the other company that I worked for 2 years, it was very elbow grease related. We had all natural products, pretty much Castile soap and vinegar and Comet, and that was it. And so we relied very heavily on our own ability to scrub dirt off rather than use chemicals. And I very much missed the chemicals.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we did leave the houses smelling nice, you know. So that's anyway. Those are some of the questions I had about these different forms of house cleaning services. Um, Now, but there's something in common. Whoever is doing the house cleaning, that is that you see the secrets of the people in the house you're cleaning. And I always thought this was fascinating. They know nothing about you. Well, maybe in some cases you did know some people a little bit.
A few of them I got to know, and I
Yeah.
really appreciated that. And then when I was self-employed, I did all the walkthroughs and the reaching out and taking the calls and building a relationship with them, because I wanted them to say good things about me so I could work for other people and get the recommendation.
Hmm. But I mean, this is something I don't think a lot of people who pay for house cleaners have any idea of how much about you is being exposed to the people who work for you. Now, I did not abuse my position here. I didn't look inside people's bathroom shelves and see what drugs they were taking or anything like that. But it just struck me that the upper classes are very ignorant about the quote lower classes and compared to the other way around. If you clean somebody's house, you know a lot about them. And
Well, I mean, I had to get down on my hands and knees to scrub out a toilet by hand, and empty out all the trashes, clean all the countertops. I mean, it went to the imprints that they left in their bed. Like I knew which side they slept on and which pillow they preferred. I knew where they drank their morning coffee by where the ring was on the counter. I mean, if you start looking around your house and just see the random items that you leave out, like that's what your house cleaner sees, and that's how they're getting to know you. And it can be as much as like where the cat always sleeps next to the knitting basket. I mean, I could go on and on. Like there's, and it's interesting. And when you're by yourself all day and have never seen these people, and they leave you notes like, "Please change the sheets," and don't say hi or use your name ever. You kind of want to put the mystery together. So.
Mhm.
That part of it was interesting to me, to try and figure out what these people were really like in person.
Yeah, no, I would be fascinated by bookshelves. If they had bookshelves. And I remember cleaning a very upscale, fancy, clearly rich people, and the books proudly displayed were all by neoconservatives, well known to me, the names. um, but anyway, you do see a lot. The other thing, which I think applies to both kinds of house cleaning, but I want to again see the comparison, is about the stigmatization of this kind of work. Now, what I found, since I did have a little uniform, it was an apron. We had all those pockets in the apron and um, sort of a vest top. That if I wore that um, in public, like in a supermarket, if I stopped at a supermarket on my way home from work, people would be looking at me. Now, maybe this is partly paranoia, but I did feel that people were looking to see what I had in my shopping cart. That would be very wrong to have a six-pack of beer. Everything I had in my cart should be very frugal and virtuous in some way.
That's a good way of putting that. Yeah, I think that's why I stopped wearing the uniform. Because if I had to run anywhere after work, I didn't want to be caught dead in my work shirt. And, I was already using an EBT card, which is how you pay with food stamps. And, using WIC checks, which are these huge coupons that you have to put on the conveyor belt in front of, a ridiculous amount of milk. I felt that stigma all the time. And I didn't want to admit that I was a house cleaner on top of it.
So, didn't you actually write something about being poor shamed in social media for using food stamps?
For EHRP?
Yeah.
Yeah, the first piece that I pitched to you guys was just about being on food stamps and social media at the same time. I saw a lot of memes comparing people on food stamps to wild animals. I saw a picture of
Memes where?
on my Facebook feed that other people were posting. And there was one that was an image of a work boot that said, if I have to take a drug test for work, then you shouldn't have to take one for welfare. And if you can afford cigarettes, then you don't need food stamps. And I had one friend in particular thought it was really funny to list the junk food that people bought on food stamps on her Facebook feed and encourage people to share their stories of things that they saw at the grocery store. And so this was all going on while I was struggling to pay rent on a studio apartment, and food stamps were my only food money. And it hovered around $200 a month for me and my then 3-year-old daughter. So,
wow. It's certainly there. The people looking at you funny, just by exhibiting this sign of being poor, which you are by wearing a house cleaner's uniform.
yeah, or, the cashiers liked to make it even more visible sometimes by I don't know if they just looked me up and down and assumed, or if they recognized me from before, but they would say on your EBT. And so everyone around me would know I was paying for food stamps. The visibility of the WIC coupons was horrible, and I always messed something up. I had a old couple in line behind me once after I had kind of argued with the cashier. The old man, as I was leaving, kind of looked at me directly and said, "You're welcome." And I was shaking, but I got my organic milk.
Well, you can get organic milk anyway on food stamps. That's pretty good.
Well, yeah, they had just updated their system, and organic milk was supposed to not qualify anymore. But my check said organic milk, and I was going to leave with organic milk.
There were a couple of places in your book where I found myself really infuriated by the treatment you were getting. But the most infuriating one was the one that had to do with your mother and her boyfriend.
Husband.
But he's quite a bit younger. I don't know if they were married at the time of the book.
They were. He's only 7 years older than me. So, but that's why I don't call him anything but her husband.
I see. So, you might want to tell about this more, but they suggest going out for lunch to a burger place, and when it's time to pay the bill, the boyfriend, I think, says that you will pay. Stephanie will pay.
Yeah. And under normal circumstances, that would have been fine and somewhat expected because they had just helped me move. Like, that's something that you do for people who help you move. But they had just helped me move out of a homeless shelter and into transitional housing. And it was a hard job, and it was a lot of work. There were stairs involved. But I only had $10.30 or something in my bank account, and didn't know when I was going to get paid again for this one job that I was doing every once in a while that didn't pay very much anyway. And he became absolutely enraged when I said I wouldn't be able to pay for the whole entire bill. And then my mom said, well, just pay the $10 that you have and it'll be fine. And so that's what I did.
And I was infuriated at your mom.
I was too.
I wanted to punch her in the nose as a mom and as a grandmom. You know, what's wrong there?
I don't know. I think my mom especially raised me to be a functioning adult. And at the time I was 29, maybe close to 30. And she saw me as an equal. Just didn't notice the environment I was in, I guess, or how much I was struggling, or that she could possibly be nice and buy my burger.
Does anybody else find that shocking? I don't know. Okay. And now I wanted to know how you came to decide to write about all this.
About house cleaning?
No, to write a book. Or to write anything. Because when you first came to the Economic Hardship Reporting Project, you were really just getting started. What made you think about writing?
Well, I've been writing on a daily basis since I was 10 years old. I have a very cute shelf in my bedroom that's lined with journals that I've been scribbling in since I was writing love poems about boys and all those things. And I have scoliosis really bad, and it curved to a point where I lost feeling in my right arm and couldn't hold a pen or pencil anymore. A friend of mine suggested I start an online journal. So I started a WordPress website and tried to commit myself to writing 10 minutes a day. I tried to write cute things about what Mia was doing and just kind of like processing what we were going through. And every once in a while it was kind of good. And so I shared it on Facebook, and friends started commenting, and I started getting more emails and comments about it. Just not only from women who are going through the same thing as me and happy to see a story similar to theirs, but also privileged stay-at-home moms who were very frustrated with a husband that works all the time and said something similar to, like, if you can do it, then I definitely can. And it just kind of grew from there. I started publishing for pay kind of in my last year of college and outside of that. So the Vox essay that Maid comes from was my first paid, like, big platform article. They paid me $500, and I thought that was going to be the most money I would ever see ever for any writing. And it went so wildly viral that after that, every editor that I pitched said, "Oh, you're the woman behind the house cleaning article." And like, yes, let's look at your piece. And so my freelancing career really took off after that. And that's when I pitched EHRP too, because I finally had some respectable clips to share with people.
Mm-hmm. I wonder, so you're a reader. I deduced that from the book. I mean, you talk about what's on the bookshelves of one of your boyfriends. There aren't that many boyfriends in the book. I don't want to make this sound more exciting than it is, but then they're quite literary.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, Mia's dad. That was one of the things I noticed, was he had like Jean-Paul Sartre and Bukowski, and that was kind of my initial like, oh, okay. And
I see. But I've always thought that the first thing about being a writer is you got to be a reader. And I get very frustrated when, like, college students will come up to me and say, I really want to be a writer. How do I do it? And I said, well, what do you read? Oh, I don't really like to read that much. Well, forget about it then. Just forget about it. And
Yeah.
would you agree that the first step is immerse
Yeah.
yourself in language?
I think David James Duncan said once, and he's my favorite living writer besides you, of course.
He's what?
He's my favorite living writer besides you, of
Oh,
course.
okay.
But he said you can get a writing degree just from a library card. And he always talked about reading as much as you possibly can. Especially for me, it was in the genre that I saw myself publishing in, which was memoir, because I can't write fiction or poetry at all. So I picked up every breakout female author with a memoir or a fiction that was close to memoir, but also tried to read as much as I possibly could. This was before kids, of course, but they made it a little bit harder to do that.
Well, that's sort of, how I learned to write, reading as a kid, reading everything. We didn't have young adult books in the olden days. You wanted exciting fiction, there was Dickens, and that's, so I was I trained myself in 19th century English writing. Another thing that really got me mad, people in your book, is boyfriends who expected you to clean their houses. Remember the guy who lives out in the country, sort of?
Oh yeah, I remember it.
Oh, good, she can remember some of them. No, but he expected you to be doing all his cleaning. What was that about?
Both of them did. I mean, because I was at home, then it was all my responsibility. And for the place that I lived in on the horse farm, that was 2 to sometimes 3 hours a day of wiping and mopping the same places several times because of all the mud being tracked in. And I discovered that I was not a farmer's wife and would never be one. And so it went south from there.
Well, I just have a couple more questions and then we'll open this up. But did you think much about the physical punishment that house cleaning involves when done? It's one thing to clean your own house or apartment. I tend to just sort of walk around and dab things if it occurs to me. But these are high pressure situations. In the group, in the teams of women, we had so many minutes per house, and it seemed that every woman who was over 20 even had something wrong with her. Rotator cuff, knees, lower back. Those are the parts that go first when you're constantly scrubbing and everything. Did you begin to see the wear and tear?
Oh, definitely. I mean, like I said before, my right arm was pretty much numb from the nerve damage from scoliosis, and so there was that. There were a lot of days that I had to just make a fist and punch the sponge into the shower floor and scrub like that. I wouldn't be able to carry groceries from the car to the house with that hand at the end of the day. My back continued to get injured. If I tried to lift something and it was way too heavy or heavier than I thought it was, my back would spasm and I'd start taking 800 milligrams of ibuprofen around the clock until I couldn't anymore because my heartburn was too bad from it. And I remember just recently, because someone asked me about it, kind of this similar question, and I remembered like, oh yeah, I didn't sleep after 4 a.m. because my back was too stiff and I couldn't sleep through the pain. And so there was a lot, and couldn't keep weight on if I tried, and incredibly exhausted, just kind of always feeling completely depleted and in a painful way. And you're always sick and can never take a day off. There's no like stay in bed and drink fluids and watch Netflix. It's you got to go to work. And your kid has to go to daycare when they're sick too, because you can't really take a work or a sick day for that, because there are no paid sick days. It's you call in sick and you might get fired.
Which is a general rule. Although didn't we change that in Washington D.C.? Didn't we get sick days? I don't live in D.C. myself, but I'm asking you. Yeah. Okay, that's a tiny start. Yeah. Well, that is pretty ghastly when you think about it. All the people who are working just because they financially have to, but they're too sick to work, or their child or children are too sick to be left without a parent. So here's my big and kind of profound question, I think. My final question: what would have to change about house cleaning and how house cleaners are treated before you could recommend that as a career or an occupation for one of your own daughters?
Wow. Barbara Ehrenreich, everybody. Wow. I would encourage them to take the self-employed route. If it was something that they really wanted to do, and I would support them in that, but I would say, get insured, because I never did that, and that was always scary. If I broke something, I just hoped that they were a good friend of mine or that they would understand. And I don't know. There's so many little things like asking your clients to have supplies out for you, cleaning up clutter. I think it's more of a demand for recognizing just how overwhelming the job itself is, especially if you're there by yourself, to clean a whole entire house in 3 hours and then go and start a whole other house and do that for another 3 hours. And there were some days that I had 3 houses in a day. And anything that you can do to make that job easier by, picking up the dishes on the counter, and just so that it is less of 100 different little tiny things that you have to do, and all you have to do is just really wipe everything down and get out of there. But I mean, Kamala Harris has been talking about the union or the domestic workers. What is it called?
Well, let's mix it up too.
Bill of Rights.
Domestic Worker Association.
Right.
DWA.
And she's starting a Bill of Rights where I would hope that domestic workers would have health insurance, that they would have sick pay, that they would get a living wage or even more, and that childcare would be provided, because you absolutely have to have childcare to work. I was fortunate that a lot of my clients would sometimes let me bring Mia with me, and that was a savior sometimes, because you don't always qualify for childcare assistance. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I guess I would say everything needs to change.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, and you started small with here are things clients could do to make things easier for us, but you're obviously reaching into a larger notion of dignity and respect for this kind of work. And how do we get that? How do we change?
Well, I think it's empathy and viewing each other as human beings on both sides. And what I would have given to have a note with my name on it, or just someone to take the time to learn that, or recognize that I was working extremely hard and not make it harder for me. So I think as soon as you start to visibly see all the millions of people that clean up after us every single day. I mean, I've been starting to count since I've been on book tour because I've been talking about this so much. Like, I think so far today, at least 6 or 7 people have cleaned up after me in some way. Either it's a janitor in a building, a busser, a waitress, the person wiping up sugar at a coffee shop, like the hotel staff. There are all these people that we just never take the time to notice. And I think that's a big part of it, is if we don't notice them, then why should we have to think about what it is that they need?
Right. Yeah, that's been my theme. You know, there are a lot of, quote, invisible people making our lives possible. We just got a bite to eat at place next door. You know, there were people in the kitchen we never saw. People going to clean up after, what we're cleaning up now. And it just to start seeing all the people around us that are doing things that make it possible for us to continue to live.
Make our lives easier, really.
Yeah.
And easier for us to do the things that we need to do. So I don't, that's where I think we could start, at least.
Well, I guess I should let everybody ask their questions now. Hello?
Hello.
Yeah.
If you have a question, as some of you know, please come to one of the 2 microphones up here. Standing microphone there or standing microphone here.
Thank you for your amazing book.
Thank you. There's a microphone right here.
I have 2 quick questions. One is kind of a share. So my sister actually was a self-employed home cleaner during a difficult time in her life. And I don't remember exactly how much money she made, but I think she was proud of what she did. I think she probably ended up in higher paying jobs, maybe in the right, different neighborhood. So I guess my question is, were you able to get higher wages from families that had more resources? Was there a lot of diversity within, I'm assuming mostly women, that you worked with? And last question is, what does your mom and family think of your book?
I'll answer the last question first, because I'm completely estranged from my family. I get an occasional text from my brother, but so I don't know yet. I haven't heard anything from them yet. And I don't really think I will. And
Your mother's afraid that I'll find her.
I will tell her if she reaches out. You need to talk to Barbara. And the first one, it wasn't so much of how much I thought I could get from a client. I was still struggling with my own worth. After working minimum wage for the same job and like just busting my butt, day after day after day, to go into this like really kind of fancy house with a person who was nice and insisted that I charge them more. Like I felt bad. I felt like I was getting away with something. And so it was really hard for me to ask for more than $20 in any situation. And that was usually because they insisted on it. For me, like 15 was pretty good.
And the diversity question, I assume there's a lot of diversity depending on where you were in the country and who does this type of work.
You mean like economic diversity, the people you work for?
I guess there was. I started posting in like Facebook parenting groups, and so I would do jobs that were with women who were just overwhelmed from having kids and an absent husband or something like that, and they just needed some help. And those were kind of the situations where they didn't tell their husbands that they were getting help, and just kind of needed someone there to get a project started or finished. And then there were other houses that, 2 lawyers and golf course, and but those houses were really easy because they never really got dirty because they didn't use them. So, okay.
So, with how popular smartphones are these days, and a lot of these apps that have started to proliferate, like TaskRabbit as one venue for people to hire maid services, what recourse do you think that we have as, just people that are fed up with how stuff sucks to try and deal with the lack of government regulations and protections for the poor, and the exacerbated societal stigma because we've got more and more victim blaming and fear mongering and classism from, the upper echelons of society? I should sound like a millennial, and I'm 27, so I technically am, but I've just aged so hard working as a barista for 5 years. I feel like I'm already, 30 or 40 on the inside. And the thing about these smart apps is that these are, your stereotype Silicon Valley startups that get $1 billion or so for venture funding. Maybe they don't survive. Maybe the ecosystem is like the laissez-faire invisible hand of Adam Smith that, neuters them out. But the ultimate bottom line is that these are still, gobbledygook corporations that have all the money in the world. And we have nothing to compare to that, and it's hard to not feel cynical about the odds given just the documented history of party politics falling short, labor unions being crippled and hampered by the limitations of federal laws such as the National Labor Relations Act, the NLRB not having any teeth to it, and unions in general just falling out of vogue. So I don't know the answer to this, and I'd like to think someone does, and I think you're the best bet since you've lived this experience, and me being the millennial that's whining and some idiot's gonna complain that I'm complaining or whatever, fuck them, is, I've only had a taste of this life, and I'm really fortunate that I was able to graduate college and make something out of it, but still, yeah, sorry.
These millennials always. Thank you for that.
What was the question exactly? How do I think the apps with the smartphones are changing the atmosphere?
Yes, I think they're the scariest thing that people have to deal with. So, what can be done?
I am not a good smartphone user. I haven't even heard of an app. It's an app that they use to find work.
Haven't even heard of an app.
I know what apps are.
You're
just
young.
not-
I'm allowed not to have heard of an app.
It's like outsourcing on steroids. So forget a company that'll even outfit you with uniforms and independent contractor tax
Yeah.
firms.
She's asking about things like
like
TaskRabbit.
like nanny.com and rover.com.
Yeah.
Oh.
The future of work. Yeah.
Well, I feel like that to me falls under the gig economy, self-employment. To me, that seems kind of the same as when I used to post ads on Craigslist. So it was me honestly looking for work. But I have found someone that I hired on rover.com once because my dog is insane and someone needs to hang out with her while I'm gone. And I used that as on a recommendation. And it seems like there are a lot of security set up for people getting work from that, where on Craigslist, I had to deal with men calling me, asking me if I would clean naked or, in costume. I can see that you're really desperate. Maybe you'll want to do this. I could help you out. And I got a lot of calls like that, so much that I stopped looking for work that way. So I see good in that, just that there is a witness to the conversations involved between the person looking for work and the person looking to hire someone. But that's just my point of view as someone who's tried to find work and was pretty disgusted.
Another question?
Sure, yes. This is a question about, for both of you, using the form of memoir to talk about larger social problems. It seems like, you're both passionate about it, and you could, especially Ms. Ehrenreich, you could have tackled it as a nonfiction book, looking at policies and, political platforms, which you do woven into your memoir. But ultimately, your books are memoirs, and I haven't read yours yet, but it clearly is. What is it that is most powerful about that form, or why did you choose that form for what interests you?
Well, I would say you were being a reporter. That she was reporting on a kind of work in America, and that's how you do it in journalism. I didn't know this at the time, and I did nickel and dime, but there's something called immersion journalism, where you actually go and experience whatever you're writing about, and that's in a way what Stephanie was doing,
Yeah,
except that she needed the money.
yeah.
But also, I have the same birthday as Upton Sinclair, and I always liked I always liked this quote that he did about, like, he wrote a book about the meatpacking industry, but he hit everybody in the stomachs. And so I always thought of the social justice part of the book as the gut punch and unexpected. I thought the memoir about a maid and the voyeurism of that would catch people's eyes, but then they would realize, oh my God, what are we putting these people through? And I wanted to show them how it was and not tell them how to feel. So that was, and a lot of the things that I feel about in the current political climate, I think personal narratives are going to be what really opens people's eyes to what's going on. And so I truly believe that it's an important way to write about our lives, especially from people in the margins.
I would add that there is some pressure from publishers, especially on women, to write in first-person narrative ways, which sometimes irritates me because it can make you seem less serious. But there are books I would have written very differently if it were not for that pressure.
Can you say more?
Well,
Which book?
huh? Which books?
Yeah.
I don't know. I might want to sell one of them. I'm trying to think. Which one was the worst? Well, I set out to write something that was to be a history and prehistory of religion. Very sweeping, huge, scholarly in my amateur scholarly way. And then the publisher said, or maybe it was my agent, said, couldn't you make this into more of a personal narrative?
Yeah,
So,
it's interesting.
and then I read an article in the New Republic by a woman writer talking about that kind of thing. So, in Stephanie's case, that's her material. That's what she's writing about. There's also pressures, I'm saying, sometimes to personalize too much, I think. Well, we have time, I'm told, for one more question.
Well, we've got two more here.
Okay.
Hi, Stephanie. I very much look forward to reading your book. My question is, since publishing the book and making it on the New York Times bestseller, in what ways has your life most profoundly changed since publishing your book?
Don't know about the bestseller list yet, so it's not. I don't know about that yet.
It
They
will.
haven't reported it. But thank you. And the things that I have noticed are these moments of reaching for another roll of toilet paper, and one is there, And like, I have 3 tubes of toothpaste underneath my bathroom sink because I can shop at Costco now. And I have more storage for food. I have a washer and dryer that like does a good job. And it's just kind of little things. Like my car always turns on. And I don't get stranded by the side of the road. I mean, it's a Subaru. It's not fancy or anything, but I mean, it works. And so there's a certain ease there in being able to afford childcare, being able to afford a nanny. I'm gone for 2 weeks, and that's expensive. And but I notice it the most, like when I decide to stop by the grocery store because I'm hungry and pick up 4 or 5 different things that I didn't intend to buy, and don't even watch them ring it up. And I don't do the math in my head. I don't do the math as it's being rung up. I don't like have this moment of stress of like, oh my God, what if I'm going to have to ask them to put something back? Like, I don't even look at how much it is sometimes because I'm in a hurry. It's just, there's a certain amount of stress that is very absent from my life. And I try to take a moment and notice it and recognize it whenever I can, because I think it's good to remember how different things are in that aspect, and to remember how different it was, and to keep that fresh in my mind.
Hi. I can relate to you in a lot of ways. I'm a nanny. So, and I'm thankfully I've had some horrible families, but I'm thankfully I've been with the family for a really long time, and they're good. They're fair, and I treat the housekeepers. We were like this, when they come in. I just wanted to know, because I've had thoughts of writing like a memoir, because of the economic and social aspect of the business. But I've always been afraid of the clients, like, or what if they associate me with the book, or like, no, because a couple of families we became family. So do you run into that with writing your book? Does anybody remember, like, are you still friends with your clients? Like, are you part of their lives still? Do they know, are they in the book, or?
You're digging there, aren't you? No. I mean, a lot of the clients that I had in Washington, I don't know, and never really did know. Like, we didn't exchange numbers. The one person that I did do that with, I would hope that he recognized himself, because he treated me very kindly. He gave me lobsters, so I don't know how he wouldn't remember that. If he, I am Facebook friends with one client, and she was posting about reading the book, and I'm just, my eyes are getting bigger and bigger, and like, oh God, it's coming. And she never recognized herself. So I did a pretty good job of hiding identities, that she couldn't recognize herself. So I guess in that aspect, I didn't worry too much. You can be a little creative in that, and choosing what details to show and what details to not show, and change names and do what you need to do, to get your story out.
Thank you.
One more quick one.
Yeah, I can relate to your lobster story, because I had a woman who was working with me, taking care of my wife who's disabled. She took a lunch break. This was in Maine. And she said, I'll be back. And she came back with a dozen lobsters that she had pulled herself. It was just mind-boggling. So, hats off to her forever. Secondly, Barbara, you said something once that has stuck with me, which is the reason that people are poor is they don't have any money. And when I first heard you say that, I thought it was just, duh. But it struck with me as just brilliant. I've used it on many.
Something I established scientifically.
Absolutely. Survey research. But I've used it many times, always to attribute it to you. But the other thing I want to mention, I don't know, it's kind of weird. I lived alone in an apartment for many years, and I did my own cleaning. The grossest part was doing the toilet, especially on the floor around the toilet. And I looked at that and I thought, there's a guy that lives in this house, and he usually stands up when he does his business, and it really makes it gross. And I thought, got to put a stop to this. So I've been sitting down ever since. And I would recommend to all of us guys, you would make somebody's life a little bit easier if you just sat down. And I thought, what if you talked to one of your employers and said, "Dear sir, would you please sit down?" And I think that wouldn't go over so well.
Well, I can think of two right off the bat that I would have loved to have said that to. I don't even think they aimed.
Anyway,
Well, let's thank Stephanie for.
And thank you, Barbara, for joining me.